Molly flopped on the bed. "Oh, Dad, you never understand me!" Well, we're all probably familiar with those kind of teenage fits, and maybe most of the time they aren't justified, but this time it was. Dad, for a long time, hadn't listened to his daughter and hadn't really tried to understand her, and now all that non-listening had snowballed up, and he really didn't understand his daughter. So we need to understand the repercussions that our actions that we do now can have for down the road. Like if I don't know this button goes to a bomb and I press it, kaboom, big problem, right? So I'm going to tell you about the good repercussions that having empathy with those around you can have, namely in building up social capital. Because Robert Putnam, a professor of public policy at Harvard University, wrote in 2000 that bonding, this type of social bonding, builds up social capital. So that brings me to our desire to mutually connect with one another manifests in how much social capital we have. It's because empathy is an interpersonal skill, and social capital is a measurement of our involvement with one another. So empathy is an interpersonal skill. It involves understanding each other, and it can be improved. It involves understanding each other. Asashi Nakao and Soji Itakura were both researchers in psychology who wrote in 2009 that at its core, empathy defies definition. But because lots of researchers have given their own definitions, but what they call an extreme type of empathy, empathic altruism, includes both perspective taking, which is cognitive, and empathic distress, which is feeling another person's emotional distress. Rebecca Schaffer, a therapist, writing in 2003, gives an excellent example of a down-to-earth example of how to really empathize with both cognitive and emotional aspects. And she describes it getting into another person's movie. Like you're sitting in this theater and you smell the popcorn and it's warm and you hear kind of people talking in the back just a little bit, and it's dark in the room and you're staring up at that movie, but all the rest of that goes away because you just get totally involved in what's going on in that movie. So when you're listening to another person, she implies that you're supposed to empathize and understand what's going on in their head and what they're feeling. So empathy involves understanding each other. Now, just like we can work on understanding derivative calculus, and yet it is also a skill, we can work on improving our empathy with effort. If you'll remember in The Matrix, I think it was, I never actually saw it myself, but it was described to me, there's this one spot where the boy is sitting there and he's got this spoon, and he's being really mindful about this spoon, and he's concentrating hard, and then all of a sudden the spoon starts to bend. Now, real mindfulness can't do that, at least not as far as I know, but it can help you improve your empathy. Dustin Ballard, an emergency physician and columnist, writes in 2009 that mindfulness practice for physicians can help them understand their patients. So let's say that you take up this mindfulness stuff and you're sitting there practicing and you are concentrating really hard on something, and then all of a sudden these Lord of the Rings role players just burst into the room. Some of them are dressed up as Gimli and Gandalf, and they're hacking at each other or smiting one another, and then you realize, Grandma? Now, don't jump to conclusions. Mohammad Reza Hojat, a researcher at Thomas Jefferson University, wrote in 2009 that there are at least 10 approaches to improving your empathy, and one of those is role-playing. So maybe your grandma's just trying to understand you better when you get into Lord of the Rings stuff. So empathy involves understanding one another, and it can be improved with effort. Empathy is an interpersonal skill. Now, when increasingly more people go out of their way to empathize with those around them, people will be more connected with one another, which is in the big picture called social capital. Social capital is a measurement of how much we're involved with one another. It places value on human networks. That is, human networks are valuable, and it is characterized by community solidarity. So human networks are valuable. If you'll remember in Luke 12, there's the parable of the rich old fool, where this fool puts all his hopes and dreams in this money that he's got stored up in the barn. Well, Mark Anielski, an ecological economist, writes in 2009 that he really is a fool, because most of us, don't get our happiness out of the stuff that we have, but instead we get it out of the people around us. That's what he says. And so social capital can be useful for getting happiness. It's good for us. But if you're not into that sort of people stuff, you're still going to need social capital, because 100% of us, last time I checked, are going to need a job, unless somebody's got some sort of inheritance that I want. Because Robert Putnam said that it's not what you know, it's who you know. We know that phrase, right? So social capital being involved and having networks with those around you is useful for getting you a job. It's worth something. It places value on human networks. Now, if you go around making friends with people just to get stuff out of them, people are going to think you're some sort of psychopath. So you're not really going to have social capital. Instead, social capital is characterized by community solidarity. Just to be clear, solidarity is a union of interests or purposes or sympathies among members of a group. It's kind of like a corporate investment bond, where everybody's putting money in and they can take money out, but like Julie Laser, a researcher at the School of Social Network at the University of Denver, says in 2009, the individual is then obligated to do certain things in the community. Like, she can get stuff out, but she's obligated to maybe babysit or behave in certain ways. So social capital says that human networks are valuable and it's characterized by community solidarity. That is why empathy is an interpersonal skill and social capital is a measurement of our involvement with one another. So all that is why our desire to mutually connect with one another manifests in how much social capital we have. By now you should know a little more about the good repercussions that having empathy can have, namely building up social capital. And you won't end up like that poor dad with his sobbing daughter Molly.